Hi everyone, my name is Oliver, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. On September 22nd, 2023, Suzanne Morphew's remains were discovered 3 years after her sudden disappearance on May 10th, 2020. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation stumbled upon her remains during a search of an area in Moffat County as part of a separate investigation, breathing new life into the famously cold case of Suzanne Morphew's disappearance. A tumultuous personal life and an inconsistent recollection of events first pointed toward the husband as the likely suspect in what the police believed to be a murder. However, new evidence has called into question the 2-year-long crusade. Over 70 investigators invested 1,000 hours of work into Suzanne's case. 135 search warrants were issued, and dozens of over 400 people were interviewed before the police felt confident in charging Barry with the first-degree murder of his wife. Even after the charges were dropped based on inadequate evidence and mismanagement, there was no doubt in most people's eyes that Barry was guilty. However, after Suzanne's remains were found 50 miles outside their search area and DNA evidence linked her death to a suspected serial killer, questions have arisen about what happened on the day of her disappearance. Is Barry Morphew far more resourceful than the authorities give him credit for, or did something or someone from her personal life cause her death? Suzanne Morphew was born on April 11, 1971, to her parents Jean and Adrian Alexandria and grew up with 2 brothers, David and Andrew. Everyone who knew Suzanne described her as an amazing intellectual and thoughtful friend. In 1998, while in high school, Suzanne met her future husband, Barry Morphew, and married him after 6 years of dating. Barry was a remarkable ball player and was signed with the Toronto Blue Jays, while Suzanne pursued a degree in education at Purdue University. Barry's career ended before it barely began after a serious injury, and he switched tracks, beginning a career in horticulture. Suzanne had been teaching for 4 years when Barry started his landscape company, which gained steam as more time passed. Together, the couple had 2 children, Mallory and Macy. They had a picture-perfect life in Indiana until Suzanne was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. She beat cancer twice, and in 2018, the Morphews moved to Mayville, Colorado for a fresh start and to be closer to their daughter Mallory attending Western State University. They moved to a gorgeous 7-acre property where Barry could hunt. He still worked as a contractor and had even taken up being a volunteer fireman, while Suzanne retired from teaching, devoting herself more to the church and taking up sports. Mountain biking was a new pastime she was exploring. From the outside looking in, the Morphews were the perfect family, but they had their share of problems, all of which would come to light following the events of May 10, 2020. May 10, 2010 started a bit differently from most Mother's Day celebrations at the Morphew residence. Barry and the girls were out of the house, leaving Suzanne alone in their home. Barry claimed to have a landscaping appointment in the town of Broomfield, 3 hours away from Mayville by car. The girls, on the other hand, went on a camping trip, and the girls had planned to return home by the evening to celebrate Mother's Day with Suzanne. However, the planned celebration never took place that evening. The girls messaged their mother to wish her happy Mother's Day, but received no text message in return. They found this odd since their mother was very active on social media. Expecting a few pictures from her best friend's daughter's wedding, they knew she had to be on her phone. After a few hours of no reply, Mallory and Macy reached out to their neighbor, Martin Ritter, and his wife to check on Suzanne. Mrs. Ritter made the trip down to the Morphew house around 4:30 p.m. to discover an empty house. She called Barry, explaining the situation, and he told her to check for Suzanne's mountain bike. If it was not there, he instructed her to call the police, and that's exactly what she did. The police showed up at the Morphew residence, and Barry Morphew and his 2 daughters made their way back home, desperate to learn the location and status of Suzanne. The police found their first solid clue a few hours into the search. The discovery turned the investigation on its head. 2 deputies found Susan's mountain bike off a steep ravine not too far from Morphew's home. The location suggested that Suzanne might have likely been in a crash, but the bike itself and the surrounding vegetation did not indicate signs of a struggle. There were no skid marks indicating she used the brakes on her bike, no damage to the mountain bike itself despite tumbling down the side of a ravine, no blood, and the vegetation in the area hadn't been disturbed. The deputies deduced it was obviously placed there by somebody. When they presented Barry with this information, he had a bizarre reaction. Barry's odd mountain lion theory would be the first of many outlandish stories, conclusions, and accounts that he would provide the investigators while they searched for his wife. Several people found Barry's handling of his wife's disappearance odd, to say the least. In a secretly recorded conversation with YouTuber Tyson Draper, he went into further detail about his mountain lion story. Barry was also absent from the search parties organized by Suzanne's brother Andrew. He didn't believe Barry's story about the bike ride and suggested that she might have been taken on May 9th instead of Mother's Day. Suspicion eventually shifted to him when Suzanne's helmet was found 1 mile away from the Morphew home in the exact direction that Barry's truck telemetry showed he'd taken that morning. Investigators might have written it off as an odd coincidence if it was not in the exact opposite direction of the Broomfield construction site he was set to visit that day. In the preliminary interview he gave the officers, he claimed to have been woken up by his alarm clock around 4:30 a.m. and left straight for Broomfield. Yet the telematic data from his Ford F-350 showed that he'd driven 1 mile west before heading to the construction site. When Barry was confronted with the data gathered, Barry provided a convenient explanation. He claimed to have been scouting elk earlier that morning at around 4:30 a.m., and was curious to see which direction they were headed so that he could track them down later. Apparently, Barry had a habit of tranquilizing elk and removing their antlers for sale. When the officers pointed out that he couldn't have spotted the elk at 4:30 a.m., if he was supposed to be just waking up, he amended his story to say that he didn't set his alarm for 4:30 and got up alone. When he was questioned specifically about the day of her disappearance, he said the day was one of the best the couple had had in some time. Barry said he was working with a co-worker in Salida that morning. He returned early, went on a hike with Suzanne, and then they grilled up some steak and were intimate. He said they went to bed together and suggested that it could have been the last time they saw each other. But as we've established, Barry is not the most reliable witness. When the police started to investigate Barry, they found out that he had lied about just about everything that happened that night. The investigators first knew something was wrong when they went through Barry's phone and vehicle telematic data on May 9th, 2020. While Barry and Suzanne Morphew did spend the afternoon and evening together, the events didn't align with Barry's narrative. At 2:42 to 2:44, the first significant deviation from Barry's accounts surfaced. His phone data revealed erratic movements around the property. When confronted by investigators, he said that he was likely hunting chipmunks with tranquilizers. At 2:47 p.m., Barry switched his phone to airplane mode, maintaining it until 10:17 p.m. Even the steak dinner he claimed to have shared with his wife was thrown into doubt. Investigators found only one dirty dish instead of two, and later that night, more peculiarities emerged on the Morphew property. The police noted additional concerning details during their scrutiny of the data from later that night. At 9:30 p.m., an hour after Barry claimed to have gone to sleep with his wife, his car reversed, moving 96 feet backward from the driveway. Investigators speculated this might have been when he loaded her body onto his truck if he was guilty. From 3:25 to 3:48, the records indicated that the door to his truck opened and closed over 80 times. Though circumstantial, the evidence hinted at information Barry wasn't sharing with the police, prompting a closer look into the events of May 10th. Interviews with co-workers revealed that Barry was not supposed to be in Broomfield that day. Their contract wasn't set to begin until a week later, meaning there was no project to inspect. According to Barry, he only visited the Holiday Inn, the job site, a local store for granola and water, and briefly stopped at McDonald's to clean his windshield. However, surveillance footage obtained by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation contradicted his account. Barry was observed disposing of 5 trash bags near McDonald's and the Holiday Inn. When confronted with the footage, Barry provided an odd reason for his disposal method, claiming he wanted to clean his car without incurring proper disposal fees.